My name is Amit Power. I'm a consultant anaesthetist at Guy's and St Thomas's NHS Foundation Trust in London. And at that hospital, I am the lead for regional anaesthesia. So I'm in charge of both the delivery of regional anaesthesia and the education, and I'm responsible for regional anaesthesia fellows there. Outside work, I'm the president of RAUK, which is Regional Anaesthesia UK, which is the UK division of the European Society of Regional Anaesthesia. My job plan allows me to do plastic surgery and orthopedic surgery, as well as breast surgery. And within those specialties, I sort of can cover from top to toe effectively. So when I'm doing shoulder surgery, I often using interscalene brachial plexus blocks. For my upper limb and hand surgery, other than shoulder, I use a combination of infraclavicular blocks, axillary brachial plexus blocks, and supraclavicular blocks. So all ultrasound guided. The orthopedic work that I do also involves lower limb work. Knee arthroplasty is, a big demand on the NHS work that we do. And so I do a lot of adductor canal blocks, and this is a block that's become popular recently. And I guess my subspecialist area of interest is really breast anesthesia. And I use a combination of fascial plane blocks for the chest wall, so the PEX block or the serratus plane block, and more recently the erector spinae plane block. And I also use paravertebrals. So paravertebrals is probably my favorite block of all. So I use a lot of ultrasound guided paravertebrals. So I think I'd probably make a moderately controversial statement and say that I think ultrasound is essential for delivery of regional anesthesia. And the reason I say it's controversial is I know that access to ultrasound has not always been something that everybody can benefit from. But in the current day, certainly with the affordability of many of the systems that we have now, I think ultrasound is essential for the safe delivery of regional anesthesia. We now know that placing a nerve in close or a needle in close proximity to nerves can be associated with nerve damage, even though you're using ultrasound. So to be able to see structures clearly without any doubt, and to be able to navigate your needle to where those structures are makes a big difference. So it's important when you're trying to demonstrate a technique that not just the expert can see it, but a novice, when they're looking at the screen, can see the structures clearly. The majority of the blocks I do, maybe 50 to 60%, are shallow blocks. So I'm talking about the upper limb type blocks or the lower limb blocks looking at the ankle or popliteal fossa. But I do a fair amount of work using on the back, looking at the erector spinae plane blocks or the paravertebral blocks. So the ability to have a system that allows you to quickly change from one probe or one depth to another is really important. And my experience thus far using machines from the Venue family, as it gives me that flexibility. We often use curved array probes if we're going to look at the back. So if we're scanning for a spine, or if we're looking at slightly larger patients and we're performing adductor canal blocks in patients that are slightly larger. And certainly the paravertebral block has been essential to have that the ability to use a curved array block and look at slightly deeper structures. So it's really important to have a system that allows me to flexibly change from one superficial type scanning mode to a deeper type scanning mode. The biggest benefit to the simple screen, in my opinion, is the fact that it's not a daunting prospect. When you present a machine to somebody who maybe is less au fait with ultrasound, the first thing they look at is the user interface. And the earlier machines I've used in the past, which have had keyboards with manual time gain compensation, immediately put people off. If you look at a sleek, black piece of equipment with very few touch buttons, it makes people feel that they can interact with it. So simple screen boils it down to what you want, which is the image and some simple abilities to change the depth and the gain. So the simpler it is, I think the more likely people are to interact with it as a product. When I look at the Venue family, the thing that most appeals to me is the fact that there's a similarity that runs between all of the models. So if you become familiar using one equipment in one part of the hospital and you go to another part of the hospital where they've got a slightly smaller machine but from the same family, you're immediately familiar with it. Another aspect of the Venue family that's nice is the interchangeability of the probes. So within a department, you may not purchase all of the same probes. You may have only one curved array probe. The fact that you can take that, move that from one system to another is useful. Battery life is important to us as anaesthetists. We don't always plug machines in maybe as we should do when they're not being used, but clearly the ability to see how much is left on the battery for me is an important thing, and a big obvious signal that you need to plug it in is also a good reminder. Well, I think one of the things I've alluded to in terms of how the new probe can allow us to see structures is to be able to delineate the borders of structures. And my experience of using it thus far shows me that actually the edge enhancement of nerves is improved. And to be able to see anything with clearer resolution is always going to be a benefit to us. And that's what will distinguish one system from another, to be able to have that enhanced visualization. The benefit to me of having the probes up top is we don't have the situation where wheels get caught behind cables. So to have a system that allows you to store the probes high up on the machine so that even at the lowest setting of the machine, the cables are not dragging on the floor is important. And it's much easier to keep them clean as well. One of the benefits of the insert for the probe holder is the fact that it holds the probe nice and high. And as many of my anesthetic assistants will attest to, I'm fiercely independent when it comes to performing regional anesthesia. I set my equipment up in advance, and I often dress the probe in advance as well. So one of the disadvantages with the previous probe holders was that the probe was partially protected within it. So if I was going to apply a dressing, a sterile probe cover or a tegaderm dressing, it was protected within that. The nice thing about this probe holder is it holds the probe nice and high, so I can fully prepare the probe without the assistance of anybody. So I like that a lot. I think the beauty of the Venue family range is that it addresses different elements or different markets within the anesthesia community. Not something I've seen from any of the competition before is something that you can look at a top end machine like the Venue that has everything and you can put in any area and it will do very well, or you can have something which is focused use such as the Venue Fit, where you might want to have it in an operating theatre environment and just use for regional anesthesia and vascular access. The beauty of the Venue family is that they've got the same common user interface amongst all of them. So I think once you're familiar using one machine, you can take that knowledge and use across the whole family. So if I think about the Venue Fit, when I initially heard about the concept, one of my biggest fears was that it would be a system that scaled down too much and it might be too small, and that there might be a compromise in terms of the size or the image quality. And I'm happy to say, having looked at it and used it, actually the size of the screen is not that dissimilar from the Venue Go, and to me it feels like a trimmer, more portable, sort of polished down version of the Venue Go. The user interface of the Venue Fit is one that I'm happy to use and I've used before, and I can't distinguish any obvious differences between that and the Venue Go. And certainly the image quality is one that I'm very happy with and very familiar with. So I was very pleasantly surprised. I can see how the Venue Fit would have a role in certain departments, absolutely. The question as to why I would pick a Venue Fit over a Venue Go is an interesting one, because clearly if you're going to buy a system, you want to get the most out of it. I think the main reason I would go for a Venue Fit would be if price was an issue. If I didn't have the funds to pay for a slightly more advanced machine, that would be one aspect. And the fact that if I wanted to use more probes, I know that Venue Fit can only take 2 probes, and if I wanted to have the ability to quickly interchange between 3 probes, then maybe the Venue Go would be the system for me. And certainly, again, it's not necessarily reflected within my practice, but if you were using a perioperative role and you wanted to take the system off the cart and move from one area to another, such as to the walls or to ED or to somewhere else in the department, the Venue Go easily removable from the cart, whereas the Venue Fit, although it is removable, perhaps less so. So I think cost is important, and certainly if cost was an issue, I would go for the Venue Fit. If I only needed 2 probes, if I wanted a machine that did vascular access and simple regional anesthesia, then actually the Venue Fit gives you everything that you need. The other consideration is when you're teaching, clearly the larger the screen, the more appealing it is. And certainly the feedback I've had when I've taught using the Venue is that the Venue is a big screen. It's really nice. People like seeing a big screen because many people can gather around it and see an image much more clearly. Whereas if you're using the Venue Fit, the screen size is slightly smaller. Although, as I said, I'm happy to say that the Venue Fit is not too small. It's definitely functional. You can still get a great image from it. So I think price, portability or detachability, and probe number is probably important. The Venue Fit, I think, serves a role where price may be beneficial. So clearly, in an ideal world, every operating theatre within every hospital would be furnished with an ultrasound machine. But often, the thing that restricts people doing that is price. And certainly some of the top-end machines carry with them a price tag that reflects that, and that means it's not necessarily practical for you to buy multiple machines. The Venue Fit potentially fits this market where you haven't got all of the functions loaded on it as standard, but you certainly have the key ones that we as regional anaesthetists would need. So somebody to do a nerve block, and then to be able to do simple lung point of care ultrasound, or to use it for vascular access. So the Venue Fit serves a potential role where you may have boiled down the essential components into something that's small, portable and affordable. From my experience at working at Guy's and St Thomas's, when it comes to purchasing ultrasound machines, the idea is to have a fleet of systems that are all similar and interchangeable. Probably the worst thing we could do is have multiple different brands or manufacturers within a department, because it causes confusion and actually puts people off, and there may well be a favoured system or a favoured machine. So certainly my hospital trust looks at finding a manufacturer they're happy to work with, and buying as many as they reasonably can at one go. I think if you're going to be buying individual systems, then people are trying to look for a machine that does everything. So affordability is important, certainly if they're limited to only buying one at a time. But I think probably the key area for me is if you can have a system that's affordable, you're much more likely to get multiple purchases. So as an anaesthetist who uses ultrasound as a regular part of my daily practice, it's a natural transition to look at what else you can do, and point of care ultrasound would be the next logical step. There are clearly advantages if I'm performing a nerve block in an area which is close proximity to the lung. The one thing we often want to do afterwards, for example, is to exclude the fact that we cause a pneumothorax. So that's something at the moment I have within my capability. The next step, and looking further, where else can I expand my role? There are two main roles. One of them is gastric ultrasound and gastric point of care ultrasound, certainly looking at starvation status or in those questionable areas, and that's something I can see myself turning to. And the next step for me would be cardiac ultrasound. At the moment, it's a somewhat daunting prospect, but I think I've got some of the skills and equipment to kind of venture on that path. And I think that is the next logical step, to sort of take my knowledge a little bit further.